Number 3. Blanca Montano. On February 3, 2011, 21-year-old Blanca Montano brought her son and her 5-month-old daughter to the University of Arizona Medical Center in Tucson, Arizona. She said that both of her children were suffering from flu-like symptoms. For example, her daughter had a fever and bloody diarrhea. It turned out that both children had contracted E. coli. Montano's son was treated and released, but her daughter's condition only worsened in the hospital. After 2 days, the baby had to be put into the intensive care unit. She ended up staying in the ICU for 2 months because she kept developing new infections. A new infection would arise just after she was getting better from her last infection. The doctors thought that the baby had developed between 7 and 9 different infections. What was really baffling to the doctors was that the baby was in the ICU, yet she developed bacterial infections that were either fecal or waterborne. A patient contracting even one fecal or waterborne infection while in the ICU is incredibly rare. Yet, somehow, Montano's daughter had developed 7 to 9 of these infections in just 2 months. At first, the doctors thought that the child possibly had a pre-existing condition, but she was checked and they found no signs of a pre-existing condition. Then they thought that the hospital staff might have accidentally been doing something that caused the infections. For example, they may have not been following proper hygiene protocols. But the doctors found no evidence of this either. A third possibility was that another patient was transmitting the infections. This possibility was quickly ruled out because the infections that the baby was contracting were not often transferred from patient to patient. Also, they weren't common infections in the children's ICU. The doctors began to suspect that someone was intentionally infecting the baby. Specifically, they thought that someone was adding bacteria to her IV line. They installed a camera to monitor the baby. 3 days later, the alarm on the baby's IV went off while Montano was in the room alone with the baby. This prompted the hospital staff to review the footage. They saw Montano intentionally try to block the camera by putting an alcohol wipe in front of it. Later that same day, the camera recorded Montano walking out of a washroom and making her way to the crib with her hand hidden under her sweatshirt. She then grabbed the IV line and started playing with it, and this set off the alarm. The next day, Montano was confronted by members of the hospital staff. She denied that she was the one who was infecting her child. The staff told her that they planned on calling Child Protective Services. Montano told them that she was surprised that they didn't call them sooner. After the meeting, Montano was barred from seeing her baby. Also, her son was taken into the custody of Child Protective Services. In the weeks that followed, the baby did not develop any new infections, and she made a full recovery. She was released from the hospital and placed with Child Protective Services. On April 11, 2011, Montano was indicted for attempted murder and child abuse with death or serious injury likely. She went to trial 2 years later in the spring of 2013. The prosecution contended that Montano made the baby sick by injecting fecal matter into her IV line. The prosecutor said that the baby was a victim of Manchausen by proxy syndrome. He said that Montano was raising the children alone and she purposely made the baby sick to get attention from the father of the children. Montano's lawyer said she was innocent and she would never harm a child. He claimed that the hospital staff made the baby sick because they were not following hygiene protocols. However, the defense did not present any evidence that any of the hospital staff did anything wrong. Blanca Montano was ultimately found guilty of child abuse, and she was looking at a sentence of 17 years. Instead, she was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Number 2.